Welcome to Florida Education News. My name is Dr. Tony Arza, and today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Troy Ingersoll, board chair in St. Lucie County Public Schools, and you're running for re-election. Thanks so much for sitting down with us.
Thank you, Tony.
So one of the things that Florida Education News is trying to do is we want to make sure that voters know about some of the people that are on their ballot. And we saw you were on the ballot in St. Lucie, so we wanted to sit down and just give you an opportunity to share a little bit about your platform. Why are you running for school board? What motivated you in the first place? Obviously, you're running for re-election, so you have some history with school board. So could you kind of share a little bit?
Sure thing. Thank you, Dr. Arzon. Appreciate everyone tuning in today. My name is Troy Ingersoll, and I've been on the school board for about 20 years now. People are like, wow, that's a long time. I got on when I was 12 years old. Not really. What first motivated me to get on the school board is I was a youth pastor. And as a youth pastor, there was a lot of restrictions for me, but I wanted the insight. And hanging out with kids all the time was just very energizing to me. Going to their lunch, mentoring them, being involved in other capacities in the SAC committee, being a PTA parent. And I realized I really had a passion for improvement in the schools. And through my love of working with children and my relationship with Christ, it sort of mirrored into what I was doing. And I got into the schools, and I was like, this is something where I've got skill set that I can really help the community and be beneficial and give back. And that's what I did. I started out, and we were testing. Those were the days where in St. Lucie County, we were a low-bottom school district. We were like 59 or 65. And we were testing, we were doing benchmark testing for 4 subjects. So every 9 weeks, we would take 2 days to test. Well, if you're testing that many times, how much are you actually teaching? And that was some of the things that were concerning to me. And we got on the board and we made some changes. And here we are now, 20 years later, we're in a school district 2 years in a row. And we've made some really progressive changes. Our reading proficiency was at the bottom of the state, and now we're right in the mid. We're not great, we're getting great, and there's always room for continued improvement. And that's one of the reasons why I feel like I'm still active in this process, and why it's key that my leadership skills and abilities are back on the board. And you say, after 20 years, don't you think you've had enough? And I can say my passion is still as great as it was the first day. I volunteer coach at a new high school. I've been coaching forever, so I have the relationships with the kids there. We do key clubs through the Kiwanis Club of St. Lucie County. So I still have that interaction with kids, but now I've even brought it to a different level from a business owner perspective that, I start looking at budgeting a little bit more aggressively. We start looking at personnel and employment issues a little bit more differently. As a business owner, you're feeding 15 families mouths every day, and as a business owner of that, I take that leadership skill and bring it into the school district, and think about HR issues that we have, and the importance of when funding in the school district and teachers and. So my eyes have been open to many different ways over the years. And there's always new challenges, a lot of new challenges. A lot of school districts are having issues with closing schools. We're opening schools. And when you open up schools and you have, another 43,000 new homes going to be built in the next 5 years, you start talking about what type of issues are you going to have? Well, you're going to have building issues. You're going to have leadership issues and putting new people in the leadership. You're going to have to hire new teachers, making sure that you've got people there to teach the students. And you need to make sure that your processes of busing and everything else is fluid. That you don't just stay in the same thing, we're just going to add a few routes and be inefficient spending. We have to be responsible.
Yeah, and you bring up your business experience, you bring up your faith and your answer in terms of things that motivate you. What do you think about those experiences and those aspects of your life that you think can help you on the school board, and why you should still be on the school board?
Well, to be honest with you, Tony, those are great experiences, and I know you're a man of faith, and God's number one. But I don't think people may not know you a lot, but your family is the most important thing you got. And I would say, with me, it was my family. So when I got involved, my kids were younger, and that I would think is probably the basis of my decisions, is what would be best for my kids? What would I want my kids to benefit from? And that's the decisions that I make for the 49,000 kids in St. Lucie County. Like, would my kids be beneficial? Whether we're bringing classroom to careers, or careers to classrooms, one or the other, bringing that into the community. How would my kids benefit? Those kids that don't go off to college, both my kids went off to college, but then my kid became a fireman. Really didn't need the degree, but got it. But I'm so proud of both of them. And my wife's an educator in St. Lucie County. She's a principal, and I get to live my life through her and listening to her and her struggles and her rewards of reaching students. And I can base my decisions off what she does. So I would say my family being number one, ingrained in the community, and the decisions that I based off was very formative in who I am. And it creates the core value of family first, and making sure that we're taking care of our kids first, and then the parents, and then being respectful to the taxpayers. So I mean that's the formation of my process of choosing for decision making.
Yeah, no, and one of the large things that people are noticing in education is that the landscape in Florida is changing. You have universal scholarships for families. You mentioned you guys are still building schools in St. Lucie. There are school districts across the state that are complaining about schools closing, and they look at the school choice movement and they blame the school choice movement. There are those that say that they welcome the competition. They say that public schools have had a monopoly over the market. But regardless of where the different voices are coming from that are critical or welcoming of the issue, they all want to know where their board members stand on it. Could you share a little bit of where you stand on school choice and what your relationship to it is on the board?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just like any politician, it does change, and you do start formatting some, like, it's a hard no for this, and then all of a sudden, you start looking at it and you say, wait a minute, this is good. This is good. So when charter schools first came out about 15 years ago, it's always public education, and that's the way that I was raised, and then that's the way that I was, formulating my thoughts. Public education and, charter schools were the devil. Literally. And then lo and behold, you get a few charter schools and you're like, this isn't what they really said. They're actually teaching different things and trying to reach students that St. Lucie Public Schools couldn't reach. So, then I open up my arms and I say, well, competition's good. I'm an athlete. I like challenges. I want to be better than them, and they want to be better than me. And good competition. And I'm not saying we're competing, but we are trying to be, making sure that we got the top dog and we're better. We're competing for those kids, but we're always trying to do it in the interest of kids. Don't hear me wrong. So my thoughts changed for the charter schools, like, hey, there's nothing wrong with them. We need competition. So now move forward to wherever day we're at now with this scholarship. And I have concerns, just like I did with charter schools, and I still have concerns after two years now. And I really don't, as a board member, I don't see it as beneficial as people think it is. I think it's detrimental. And the reason is, Dr. Arzar, is if you don't have any accountability, you don't have any making sure that the kids are doing what they're supposed to be doing, I think education is going to be lost. And then the generation of the kids that are going to inferior schools, that are going to stay at, and I don't have anything against homeschools, but their parents are keeping them home for their $8,000 and they're not really educating the kids. You know who pays for that? You and me. How do we pay for that? Because in years to come, when kids aren't really out there in the real world doing real jobs like us and can't function because they weren't given the right tools and education. And yeah, they said they went to school, but they didn't get a real diploma. They're not getting the one that's certified like a charter school does or like a public schools. Now that may change. But from some of the schools that are receiving money that don't have any accountability, it is a major concern. And when I say major concern, if it came to a vote for me, I'd probably vote no. But at the same time, if there's accountability, you take government funding, you get government accountability. I'm not going to And we don't want to tell you how to teach or what to teach, but you should take at least a test to make sure that the kids are on par and going to be productive citizens. Going to pay, when we're old, and going to pay my Social Security bill.
So what I'm hearing, just to make sure it's clear for those that are listening. So what I'm hearing is that you welcome choice. You want to make sure there's accountability for those choices and make sure kids are learning.
100%.
Okay.
100%.
And then the other thing that people are experiencing today, a major pain point for residents in Florida and the entire country, is the economy and affordability. And most people don't know that St. Lucie County oversees a $1 billion budget, 1.3, I believe.
$1.3 billion, yes, sir.
And so when people hear numbers like that and they're struggling to provide for their own families, they're struggling to afford to buy their first home, they're struggling to pay their rent, they want to know, how will you, if you're elected and re-elected, how will you make sure that those dollars are serving the people in St. Lucie County?
Well, that's a huge issue, affordability. And we're drawing a lot of people up from Fort Lauderdale and Miami, and we're getting a lot of people from New York, and they're not young people, they're all older people. And that's a good thing to have. I mean, you got a lot of money flowing in your community, that's great. But if you don't have a balance, you're not going to have services. You'll just have a community of all old people, and there's no one to serve them. So there has to be affordability. There has to be. Someone has to go and teach. Someone has to be a nurse. Someone has to be, works everywhere. And if we don't have that, you have an unbalanced system. So it's dependent upon us as a school district to make sure that the kids are there, able to step into the next generation. But like you said, is how can we make it affordable now? How do, you come in, you worked hard 40 hours, 50 hours a week, and your paycheck's going to pay your taxes. How do you have faith in me that I'm spending it appropriately? And that's crucial, because, and I'm going to tell you now, I have 20 years of experience of doing it. You can look at my track record and say, hey, this guy was on task, he didn't overspend, our teachers make about 75% of what we bring in, transportation gets another 10%. So you already see where the budget's automatically going. We're putting it back into the community. We're putting it back in where people get jobs. So, and then also, we're so blessed to have a great superintendent and a great administration that we've been together for a while. And the state of Florida recognized us as being the third most efficient school district in the state. So when we start, worrying about, how are we doing, it is nice when Tallahassee says, you did a good job. You're number 3 in the state. So that gives me reassurance as a school board member that I'm just not listening to the school district, but the state is even recognizing our efforts.
Yeah, no, and of the different subjects that we've covered today, I just want to make sure you have the opportunity to share. Is there something that you want voters to know about you when they go to the ballot box?
Yes. I'm very grateful to serve in St. Lucie County, and I look forward to serving another 4 years if you come out and vote for us on August the 18th.
Thanks so much, Troy.
Thank you, Dr. Arzo.
It was a pleasure.
Yes, sir.